guys, it's Maddie, and today I'll be doing my wrap-up for the month of August and September. So since I didn't do an August wrap-up, I'm just going to combine these 2 months together because I do want to wrap up both of these months. So in August, I read 3 books, and I read a total of 1,179 pages, so not too bad. I think it's definitely more pages I read than the last month. I read 1 library book and 2 physical books that I owned. As for the years, I read 1 2012 release, 1 2016 release, and 1 2017 release. I read 1 sci-fi graphic novel, 1 sci-fi book, and 1 fantasy. So interestingly enough, I read 2 sci-fi books in August, and I'm not a sci-fi reader, so that was kind of funny that I ended up reading 2 in 1 month. That's a first. 1 of the books I read was by a male and female author, and then the other 2 books were both by female authors. And all 3 of the books I read in August were part of a series. I read 1 adult book, 1 YA book, and 1 new adult book. So a lot of diversity within the age groups that I read in August. I gave 1 book 3 stars, and the other 2 books I gave 4 stars. And out of the 10 books on my set TBR, I read 3 of them, so honestly that's not that good. I didn't really stick to my TBR in August, but I did get to 3 of the ones that I planned to read in August. So that's it for my stats. Now let's just get on to the books that I read in August. And I'm going to do this in order of my rating, lowest to highest. I used to do this, I don't really do it anymore, but I want to get back into it because I really like that way of doing it. So starting off with the lowest rated book I gave in August, the first one I have is Saga Volume 1. I think it's by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples, and this is a graphic novel. It's a sci-fi book about these 2 people who are from different planets, and they fall in love, but they're being chased, so they're like running around the universe getting chased by the bad people. I honestly don't even remember what this book really is about, but that kind of is saying something because I wasn't all that fond of it. I did like parts of this book a lot, but there were some parts that just went over my head because it is sci-fi and it's such a really high fantasy sci-fi. So it was really hard for me to get into because of that, because I don't read sci-fi. I don't really like reading it, but I heard so many good things about this graphic novel series that I wanted to give it a try. And for the most part, there were some of the parts of this book that I loved. I loved the romance. It's a star-crossed lovers kind of romance deal where people are trying to break them apart, but they love each other so much that they stay together. And I really love the romance part of it. But the rest of it I didn't really care for, so I ended up giving it 3 stars. It was just okay, but I definitely wouldn't consider ever continuing on with this graphic novel series. Next, I have a book that has taken me forever to get through, and I finally got to it in August. Thank gosh, the Tome Topple Readathon really helped me get to it, and that is A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas. Finally got to this book. So excited that I got this out of the way. Though I have to say though, this book had some disappointment for me. Don't get me wrong, there were things that I loved about this book. I think the romance was just as good in this book as it was in A Court of Mist and Fury. I just love Feyre and Rhysand to death, and I loved seeing their romance develop further throughout this book. However, there were some issues I had with the ending of the book. It was very convenient, and I didn't like that at all. There were a lot of convenient things happening at the end of this book that were just too easy, and it really took away from the suspenseful feeling that the ending would give. I started to feel less emotionally attached to the characters because they were getting off so easily, and at the end of this book a war happens and a lot of the characters don't make really any sacrifices, so it kind of took away from the suspense of the ending of this book. And there was one thing about a certain character that came out of nowhere that I absolutely hated, and it's a spoiler so I won't say, but I just felt like this aspect of this character was thrown in there because it was a popular demand that the author had to do. And I'm being very vague with it, but it really bothered me, and I hated that this was thrown into the character's aspect. It ruined the character for me, so I really am disappointed in this book. However, it was still great. I loved how we got to see more of the other courts in this book. We got to see all the courts and all the High Lords together, and that was awesome. And I am really excited for the companion novels that will be coming out next year, and I'm really curious to see who these companion novels are going to follow, because this book ends Feyre's story, which is kind of sad because I really love Feyre. But I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. I wish I could have given it a 5-star like I did the other 2 books, but this one did have a lot of problems with me, so that was disappointing, but I still loved it for the most part. And my favorite book I read this month was a reread, and that is Infinity by Jess Accardo. I reread this book in anticipation for the second book so I could refresh my memory on it, and I love this book as much as I did the first time I read it. So this book is about Tori, who finds out that there's a secret project going on that allows people to travel to different dimensions of Earth. So this is like a different dimension traveling book. It is so interesting and so good. This is a sci-fi, so the first time I had ever heard of it, I was like wondering if I would actually love it, but I ended up loving it even more the second time. I love the characters in this book. I love Corey as a character. She's an artist, which makes me feel very related to her because I'm not an artist, but I'm a very creative person. I love that aspect of her. And I think the romance in this book is just done so well. It's so steamy to the point where it's like, should this even be considered a YA book? But it still is. I feel like it should be more of a new adult book. The one little gripe I have about this book is that I wish we could have seen more different dimension traveling in it. We didn't really get that in this one, so and I was kind of expecting something like that, and we didn't see that, so that was kind of disappointing. But I overall really love this book. I gave it a 4. I think I gave it more of a 4.5 out of 5 stars, which sounds about correct. So I would really recommend this series. There are 2 books out right now, and I ended up reading the second book in September, which I will get to really soon. So that is all for the books I read in August. Now moving on to September as far as the stats go. So I read 3 books in September, the same amount I read in August. And I read 690 pages, so this was a lot less than the number of pages I read in August, so I didn't really improve on that part. They're all physical books that I owned. 2 of the books I read were released in 2003, and one of them was released in 2017. I read 2 contemporary mangas, and I read 1 sci-fi, so another sci-fi read, so unlike me. And all the books I read were written by female authors. They were all part of a series, and they were all YA books. And I gave 1 of the books 4 stars and 2 of the books 5 stars. Again, starting first with my least rated book of this month, which really isn't a low rating because my lowest rating was a 4-star, and that is Omega by Jess Accardo, the second book in the Infinity Division series. It's called the Infinity Division actually, so this is the second book in that series. This is one of my most anticipated releases for this year just because I really love this series, and for the most part it didn't disappoint at all. In this book we follow a different character than we did in the first book. We follow Noah, and he has always found this one girl, Ash, in all the dimensions he's traveled to. So he gets stuck in this one dimension and he finds Ash, and usually with the other Ashes he gets involved with them, like a relationship, but he usually gets over them, but with this Ash he can't get over her. And throughout this book, Ash and him hear about this thing called Omega, which is a secret project. They're trying to figure out what it is exactly. I didn't love this book as much as I did with the first book, but I still loved a lot of parts of it. I really liked getting to know Noah since he was in the first book, and we got to know a lot more about him in this book, and also Ash, which she was a character that was mentioned in the first book, but she was never really brought, like, we never really saw her, but we see her in this book, and I really loved her character. And again, this book has a great romance, just as good as it was in the first book, but it follows different characters, so it was really interesting to see. And as I said, this book did not disappoint, yet I didn't think it was as good as the first book. I still really loved this book, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. And then my 2 5-star books are rereads for me, and they're part of a manga series, and that is Ouran High School Host Club by Bisco Hattori. I love this series to death, and I'm so excited to keep on rereading these. I'm rereading them because I want to do a review on them really soon. So if you guys don't know what this manga series is about, it's a really pretty popular shoujo manga series, and the anime is pretty popular too. But this series is about a girl named Haruhi who gets accepted into this school where a lot of rich people go. But she gets accepted because she gets good grades, so she gets a scholarship, so she is allowed to attend. And her first day there, she is trying to look for the study hall or someplace really quiet to study. So she ends up going into like an abandoned music room that she thinks no one is there, so it'll be quiet. But instead, there she finds the host club, which is a group of boys who entertain girls, not in the way you're kind of thinking, but they entertain them by talking to them, by serving them tea, and making them feel special. And while she's there, she ends up breaking a really expensive vase. So because of that, the club has her join the host club to pay off her debt. But the thing is, none of them know at the time that she is actually a girl. They think she's a boy because she's dressed very much like a boy because she's so poor she can't afford her own clothes. And that is basically what this series is about. It is so much fun. I absolutely adore the characters in this series. They are so great and so funny. Tamaki by far is my favorite character. He's just so lovable and cute and handsome, and I just love him to death. And I love all the characters in this series, and like I said, I'm so excited to keep on reading them, and I just don't feel like I could ever give any of these books less than a 5 stars because this series is just so near and dear to me. So I would really recommend it if you haven't started yet. They are great and they are hilarious and just so cute. So that concludes my September wrap up and my wrap up for August too. So I hope you guys enjoyed the